Basically, it's the Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme about cults the whole time.
I don't know that meme, but I believe you.
You don't know that meme?
But as we've established, I trust you completely, so I believe it exists.
That sounds kind of culty.
Truth, Ruth. Welcome to Cult Favorite, the podcast that burns a fear tower every Monday. I'm Merinda Simmons.
Yeah, it really makes it kind of difficult when that fear tower catches on fire as we're trying to record. And I'm Mike Altman. We are two religious studies professors trying to understand all these cult documentaries that you can't stop binge watching. If you want to support the show and help more people find us, you can follow us on all of the socials at Cult Favorite Pod. Also, be sure to subscribe to the show and leave us a rating and a review, especially a review. You know, the search loves a good review. So
I love a good documentary. What are we talking about today?
Me too. I wish we had one.
Listen, it's going to be fine. We're going to say some more things about it and it's going to be good. We're talking about The Garden, which is streamable on HBO Max.
Yes. The Garden, cult,
right.
Or Commune.
It's
or
really
is it Commune or cult?
Commune or cult.
Commune or cult.
Yeah, because it gets more dramatic as you go.
Yes.
So what did you know beforehand?
I had seen the picture on HBO Max a lot and was like, oh, I should probably watch that. And I knew about preppers. Mm-hmm. I had knew about preppers. I recently ran into a prepper who told me how many deep freezers with padlocks I should have for the number of children that I have.
Seriously?
One each.
Like, where do you get the space? What do you do? I have logistical questions about preparation, which is maybe why I'm not prepared for much.
I have
for me, it's a logistical issue.
I have 4 bags worth of prep stuff in my basement. That my partner was like, we need to be prepared for like a flood and or a hurricane and or tornadoes and or government collapse.
I have a dirt floor in my basement.
Yeah, me too. That's what they're sitting on.
That's not nothing.
Yeah, no,
I can keep things cool down there if I took the time to put things down there.
Yeah, no, I have a tent and like 4 or 5 bags of stuff, like food, clothes, stuff. Yeah.
Many of the people who come to the garden are there because they are convinced that the end of the world is nigh and that they need to be prepared.
And I will say too, the other thing I knew, the 2030 number.
What is that?
So they said said that the society will collapse in 2030. Like by
Patrick,
2030.
the founder, says
Patrick
that.
said that. Big Tyler said that, or Tall Tyler, Blonde Tyler.
We haven't done our synopsis yet.
We'll get there.
Go ahead.
But I that number though, I've heard that before. So the prepper I ran into also said 2030.
Where do you run into a prepper?
It's a long story.
Okay, I'll skip it.
I'll tell you off air.
Okay.
Can't
just like at the grocery store.
Yeah, well, yes, they're there a lot,
sure,
frankly, but
sure.
it's a whole other story. But,
okay.
but that number apparently is like, I don't know. So here's a dissertation topic for somebody out there. Figure out why the number 2030, why that's the year. Like that's a kind of why that's the year that everyone thinks society is going to collapse. I don't know.
We like even numbers.
We like even numbers.
2000 was a thing.
Yeah, but no, 2030 is that was on the show a lot, and so I knew that number. I went to Bonnaroo in 2004.
Sure.
For my birthday.
Okay.
So that was close to this. It was when it was good. This was pre.
But why is Bonnaroo? Maybe this is like a segue into a synopsis. Because I knew that communities like this, like self-sustaining communities exist, obviously. But I didn't know about this specific one. Why does Bonnaroo, what link are you making between Bonnaroo and a self-sustaining prepper community?
Well, at least that's I think we'll get into this, but because if you go far enough right or far enough left, you end up in the same spot, which is like, but the Bonnaroo thing I thought was funny because this reminded me of the people that Bonnaroo, they set up you're camped out in this farm in Tennessee, probably not that far from the garden, honestly, for a weekend to listen to music, but they have, all of this art and all of this. It's supposed to be that same kind of communal living vibe. People just walk up and they're like, "Oh, it's your birthday," and they hand you a chocolate mushroom. Maybe.
Don't you still pay for things at Bonnaroo though? Doesn't it cost like $50 gajillion? I don't know. I've never been to Bonnaroo.
Yeah, I mean, back then, this was like the second or third one, I think, and the ticket was expensive, but once you got there was a lot
it's
of
not like $24 water bottles and stuff.
No, it was a lot of $1 Yinglings and $1 grilled cheese sandwiches.
Sure.
That was kind of
for the sake of the community.
Yeah,
sure.
But there's a way that Bonnaroo and other music festivals capitalize on the aesthetics and symbols and ideas of some of this stuff to make people feel like they're doing something meaningful. When
Burning Man is the one that I thought of.
Yeah,
but of course that's much more like emphatic where art and creativity is concerned. But that'll become, a part of the tension that emerges in this community when somebody wants to throw a party and then somebody doesn't. It's in the name of art and expression. But then they come together with burning fear tower down.
Yeah. So what did you know?
Well, okay. I like I said, I knew that these communities exist, but I didn't know about this one specifically. But to what you just said about if you go far enough to the right or to the left, you end up in the same place. And I'm increasingly, I don't know. I don't have like anything sophisticated to say about whether or not that is true, but there is a moment in the series. This is a 6-episode series on Max. And there's a really interesting moment where one of the prospective members who comes to see what it's all about is an evangelical Christian who like knows that, like the end of days is upon us. And he's a real like traditional family man who just wants to protect, do for him and his. And he's sitting with like the communes. He calls her a witch, I think, like a hippie witch. And she's giving him these like energy treatments for his sciatica or something, or for his back pain. I thought that was a good little like marriage of the differing minds.
Well, he didn't. Well, he did
because he's like, I don't know about this, but maybe it'll help.
He didn't like her light language. That bothered him. Mm-hmm. If you go far enough left or far enough right, you end up at like Natural News. Do you know Natural News?
No.
Okay, it made a big splash during COVID as being like a anti-vax news source.
Oh,
but
I don't
because I knew people. I
don't put things in my basement, and I kind of stay away from news. I don't know.
But like seriously, I know people who are like lefty new age crystal types who are COVID's not real, and then I know like homeschool moms who are like COVID's not real.
Oh, for sure. No, there's a Venn diagram that overlaps for sure.
And I feel like that was part of what was happening in the show. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. Give us the rundown. What is the synopsis?
So here's a quick 5-minute synopsis. And like this was 8 episodes of like...
No, it was 6.
6?
Yeah.
Okay, it felt like 8. It was 6.
Well, and the last one that we did was 8.
Was 8.
I think 8 is a popular number for like what the limited run of a docu
I think that,
series is.
And there were 8 episodes of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I think there will be 8 more of those. I don't think there'll be 6 more of this.
I'm not sure because this one, I mean... Maybe not, but this one definitely does end though on a like, what will happen next?
Yeah, I've thought something. We'll get there.
Okay, we'll get there.
So the show originally aired on Discovery, so it's a quick watch on Max because there's no commercials and it's like 45-minute episodes. But so the actual garden, was founded in Lafayette, Tennessee, 21 acres in 2009, and there was a whole social media thing, especially on TikTok, about people who had been on this intentional community.
Because they were inviting people to come. They were posting a lot of videos and saying, come one, come all. You need this.
Yes. And that was around 2021-ish. And there's actually a Vice article and Vice when it did the thing. So a lot of the stuff there's footage of Patrick, one of the founders of the garden, who was earlier video of him with like long hair that I think was part of some of that earlier stuff that they cribbed. And then what's this show is that they are now expanding to a new property in Missouri. And the show is called The Garden. They are headed to this property in Missouri. You get the idea this is sort of like The Garden, like part deux. But actually, if you do a little digging, it's called Enderfield and is its own thing in Missouri.
But it's the same people, right? So they're trying to build.
And there's another one in Florida. And so there's actually a kind of network, and there's actually a larger kind of coalition behind all of this. So there's like a bigger structure because like who's buying this land? They don't really talk about any of that stuff.
Right.
So this new move, I think, for a TV producer is like, hey, this is a cool chance to like watch this community unfold and see what happens. So you have basically these people who have seen all this stuff on social media and they're inviting people in. And really the main person doing all this is this guy Tree and his partner Julia, who are really the ones on TikTok and Instagram sort of putting out these invitations. And so the show, the 6 episodes is really about these. You have the old guard who had been in Tennessee, Patrick, Tree, Julia, a few others, Vibe, Swoop, Goat, and then the newcomers who come in kind of staggered throughout the series.
Because they're asking for more people to come. They're saying they're opening themselves back up because when they were like, hey, come one, come all, here's the address. People came in. I didn't know about the Vice piece. But then, those social media posts were like, this is a cult.
Right.
That's when then they shut everything down. Yeah.
And then, so now they're kind of reopening and they're reopening in a new place. And they do, it's a sort of intentional off-grid community trying to build a sustainable commune. And they make all of their decisions by unanimous consensus through these council meetings where they reach decisions with 10 seconds of silence to signal agreement from everyone. And so basically they set up a system where these newcomers, so you have 2 Tylers, you have blonde Tyler and brown-haired Tyler, who becomes Oak. Heather, Naraya, Heather is there's one Tyler's wife. Jessica is another one. There's a few other people. So they're
all very different from one another, which I have things to say about later.
Yes. And the way the system works is you come in as a visitor for 10 days, and then the whole group comes to you can ask to stay or you can decide to leave. And then the whole group, if you want to stay, has to reach consensus on accepting you. And then once you're in that way. And I did find out from a couple of interviews with some of the producers who were embedded with them that the production crew actually had to go through the 10-day thing before they could start filming, where they were working and doing all the same stuff. So over the 6 episodes, newcomers arrive, some stay, some leave, personalities clash, there's tornadoes, there's sexy parties. And all along the way, there's this ongoing question of like, is this a cult? And people talking like who is the leader of this leaderless collective? Who's behaving cultish? The number of times someone's like, that sounds kind of culty. Like cult becomes an adjective.
Yep.
And basically it's the Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme about cults the whole time.
I don't know that meme, but I believe you.
You don't know that meme?
But as we've established, I trust you completely, so I believe it exists.
That sounds kind of culty.
Truth, Ruth. So like that very question though, that central question of is this a cult or is it a commune is
that's what you want to talk about.
Well, it's something I want to ask you about. Like, why do you feel like that is compelling to people as a question in the first place? Why?
I don't.
Is it just because cults are weird and we like thinking about weird stuff? Or do you think it's more complicated than that?
I think much like our last documentary, The Mormon Wives, this is one of those things where something pops up on social media and then TV production is like, hey, we could do something with that, right? So the Mormon wife swinging scandal erupts and it's like, we could turn this into, a Kardashian show. I feel like here it's the question of like, is this a cult or not? And how much traction that got on social media as a thing was like, well, we could make a whole show about that. And so it kind of gets shoehorned in as like the driving, I mean, that's literally in the name, right? Cult or, and so I think that I don't find it a compelling question as a whole framing device for the show.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could find it as a compelling frame. So I would rather do Hillsong, cult, or church than I would the garden, because I feel like there's more.
Because you feel like it's an expose or something instead of
I think what I realized when I was sort of like, as I was watching this, is like my own definition of cult carries with it like some sort of violence or abuse must be happening.
Yeah, because I don't like it. I don't like the word at all. I don't like the definition at all. Like, I mean, not your definition. Your definition is sophisticated and interesting. But I think it's a word that is profoundly unhelpful.
Yeah, that's why we named our podcast after.
Well, yeah. I mean, it is why though. Like we find these like documentaries interesting as a social phenomenon, or at least it is why I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you like? So, do you find that it's an equally vapid question?
Can I ask you? Well, let's finish what you were going to say about Hillsong, though.
Well, like I just think that the question. I don't want. This is spoiler for my takeaway, but like, I don't know that there was enough culty behavior here, despite all the people accusing each other of culty behavior, to make that make it an interesting question.
But do you feel like if there were that behavior, then it would be an interesting question?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it was like, what are we going to like? Yeah, it would raise a bunch of questions about what that word is doing and what we mean, and like what's the difference between, this form of authority here or authoritarianism here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I have a question that is probably ridiculous and definitely betrays my lack of knowledge where preparation and logistics are concerned. How does a self-sustaining community that is off the grid charge cell phones and use them? I'm sure that there are like 10,000 very easy ways. Like, are there solar powered? I don't know.
I mean, I'm assuming they have solar powered. Like you
chargers?
can get a solar powered cell phone charger. I think I might have one. Yeah.
Okay, that was one of the things that I wondered a lot. Those things trip me up. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
Or you're just like they're not that. It's not like they're like off in the middle of nowhere. This isn't even that far. This isn't even. It's 21 acres, but it's not remote, right?
That's
so
true.
like
That's a
they
good
have
point.
a neighbor they can run to during a tornado.
That's
they
a good
have.
point.
They get stuff from other places. They're driving to go get food out of dumpsters.
Their interrelation between like insular community and relationship with neighbors and community more externally or broadly was one of the things that I did think was kind of interesting. And the founder is really quick to say that when you're moving into a new community, you need to quickly establish a good relationship with your neighbors. And they, show images of them like shopping at stores and stuff. Unlike the vibe from Wild Wild Country.
The Rajneeshis, yeah.
Right. So there are different approaches to that question, whether it's a cult or a commune.
Right.
From the people that we hear from. I enjoy the fact that the issue of definition is on the table from jump.
Yeah.
We hear from Tree, the person so it's like Patrick is the founder, but Tree and his wife Julia are sort of like the face of the group that we see. Tree's the one who's posting everything to social media. Julia is the one who like gets stuff done. And the producer asks, or whoever the camera person asks Tree a question of like, what are you a cult or not? And he's like, well, what is a cult? Society right now is a cult. People live regular lives and they're born into a cult and they get told what to do and da-da-da. Tyler, a prospective member who is like former military, also is a, just get stuff done kind of dude, like very action oriented and not very conversation oriented, says if they're not a cult and they're just weird people, then I'm all for that. But then later when he's describing like he wants to be the leader and he wants him and his wife to be like running things without having to deal with consensus. And then somebody tells him, that sounds kind of culty. And he's like, yeah, well, it is what it is.
Yeah, he'd be fine to be a cult leader.
Jessica, who is a very different kind of sort, who like travels with her eyelashes, and she's, we keep track of like how many of her nails stay on throughout the course of her 10 days. She's not pro-cult, but she's not anti-cult. Like, so different people have different relationships to that word. And so I like that and I think that that's kind of telling, because I like that you can't ask the question without confronting that kind of interpersonal nuance.
Right. Yeah.
But I find it a profoundly unhelpful question.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, it's whatever, the question itself is not super helpful to answer, but other people's answers are very interesting and worth paying attention to.
Yeah, they're revealing, they're illuminating. It's just, and so much of the conversation about how and why these documentaries get made or these shows get made is what the purpose is in making them. Like, some of them are very much on a mission to expose something and try to get a awareness out there and have a conversation that hasn't been had. Trying like in a direct way to take someone down. This is not that, I don't think.
No.
And
there's no one to take down.
Right. And so this is not doing that. This is more just a showcase of a community that's going to seem kind of weird because we see a compostable toilet, and that's kind of interesting, and oh my God, cold showers in the woods and whatever. But I don't know it seems like the series itself is getting in on and engaging with a insular social media conversation of a bunch of people's TikTok videos that are asking, is it, isn't it? And so the show is saddling up to that table and weighing in. Yeah.
Because I don't think there's no villain. Mm-hmm. Like, so we're thinking about, we kind of talked about the docu-soap, documentary, reality television sort of spectrum around these things. And, at least in Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, like Whitney got a villain at it. Mm-hmm. Like they definitely, and whether she I don't think she realized that, because the best villains, one of the things they say in pro wrestling is the best heels think they're baby faces, right? The best villains think that they're actually doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And that was Whitney. And you don't have a good heel, a good villain.
Best good for like portrayal. Like, they're the easiest to portray as villain.
There's not
what you mean?
There's not a strongly characterized villain.
Yeah, okay.
There's no one who you're like, who's the bad guy?
Got it.
And it's like the bad guy is like Tree could have been at one point because he seemed really paranoid.
They go back and forth for sure.
But you don't have like, and when most of these, if it's a kind of expose model, it's like Jim Jones is a bad guy.
Yeah.
All right, cool, right?
Sure.
Some of the other ones that are more documentary, like we saw like with Heaven's Gate, they're moving back and forth, and there's different voices on who the bad guy is, depending on how you ask. Mm-hmm. But I think like with this documentary, you don't have a strong sort of villain, and so it doesn't have something to kind of organize around in that way. Mm-hmm. Especially because it is, I think, produced in that more reality TV way.
And I'm not convinced that the question of whether something is or isn't a cult is even very useful when there is a clear villain. But I think that the way that it becomes such a central plot driver, and we're going to answer this question with yes or no, I guess just keeps me kind of like wondering why, or what is gained by answering it in the affirmative or the negative.
Yeah.
So the things that they do emphasize then as that with that kind of framework is we'll see things that don't really become actual plot points at all, but still get lots of airtime.
Yeah.
Like the emphasis on like sex and specifically polyamory seems really voyeuristic to me. Like I think different modes of relationality and community are interesting. Like you can say something about that, but it's sensationalized in a really specific way by becoming part of the show when and then it's nothing that becomes part of how they engage anyway. It's just an element of who some of the people are, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, way more present, but like never discussed, at least not overtly, is the gender dynamics that emerge, because we see several examples of really capable women deferring to self-important, even if well-meaning men. Like we see Julia supporting Tree even at his most self-describedly paranoid. And we see her crying, saying like, I understand his perspective, but I also understand the perspective of this community. And there's just nothing to be done because I gotta support my man. Heather is a private investigator who has access to all sorts of information and intel, but the way that she is characterized and introduced as a character or a plot element is in her just remarkable deferral to Tyler, the taller blonde Tyler, who is the former military prepper.
It's not fair that the other Tyler had to become Oak and other Tyler didn't.
Well, there was already a Tyler, and then they say that they don't like having people who have the same names, and so the second
they should have made
Tyler,
them both change.
Oh, okay.
It should have been like Redwood and Oak.
Maybe. But Julia gets to be a Julia. You want them all to have like
no, I just want those
names?
two. If one Tyler can't be Tyler, nobody can be Tyler.
Well, but maybe there's another. Maybe Vibe's name is Julia. We don't know.
Again, I don't think if there's two of them, it would the only fair thing would be. And plus,
you're saying in every case. This isn't just about the Tylers. No. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so, I don't understand why there aren't. I mean, I do, but as a point of principle, I don't understand why there aren't questions about that. Like there are loads of really interesting gender and sexual dynamics that emerge. I don't think that the interesting ones are about polyamory, but those are the ones that get airtime because it's like, that's that, still seen as like other and weird. And I'm just like, ugh.
Even the one newcomer,
find it exhausting.
The truck driver, the woman who was a truck driver.
Tashila,
thank you. Like, out of nowhere, they're like, they have her talk about her poly couple and
like
a poly
why?
Group, and it's like, and then has nothing to do with anything.
Like talk about it if you want, like as if she introduces it as like a piece of who she is, and this is my job, and this is my relational status, and whatever. But like, it's. I guess maybe what I'm getting at is like what gets presented, what gets brought to the fore as worth discussing is something that implicitly, and this I think is the case in a lot of these documentaries, what seems worth talking about to the people making it is also what implicitly is presented as weird or other or something that gets reinforced as a kind of pejorative offshoot of what traditional society should look like.
Yeah.
And I think that those things are actually, a lot of them anyway, like polyamory, like pretty mundane. Like that's the relational reality for a lot of people. And so like I don't know.
Well, I think it's part of it is like if they want, like if the answer is yes, this is a cult, or like you got to have your kind of cult checklist. So it's like, well, they don't have a charismatic leader because Patrick's kind of boring.
We don't see overt abuse.
We don't see, but sex, right. You got to have weird sex stuff for a cult, right? And so like we got to find some weird sex stuff.
Yep.
And so they do.
Yep.
But again, it's like, it's kind of, I guess this is a weird, I think it all feels very weak sauce. Like the whole thing is just sort of, it's very just sort of like, just like, really? Like, okay.
Like they went in thinking that there was a bigger story than there was, and so then they had to make a story?
Yeah, like we've already booked this with Discovery Channel, so what are we going to do?
I mean, so that's one of the things that stuck out to me is like what things get emphasized and what things don't in the name of driving that central question of whether something is a cult or a commune. The other thing that stuck out to me was the dynamic between the garden members and the camera crew itself. That I think was maybe I found the most energy just narratively. Like I thought that had the most dynamism for me. I thought that was the most kind of dynamic exchange because it's much more self-reflexive and overt, even if not incredibly sophisticated, than it is like, what we see with Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, who very much, we know that there's a crew and we hear them talking to them and stuff, but there's not a kind of relationship that's getting built or right. For better or worse, like for affinity or antagonism. So the members talk about being scared to have a film crew there because they feel exposed again and they know that they're making that choice, but they're really cautious about that. But yeah, like societal collapse is coming, and so they feel like they need to get the message out. And so it's like a necessary evil is how they see like the camera crew in the first place. But when Nariah, who is one of the, she's a prospective member, but she has kind of become part of the group before we get like, here are the handful of newcomers whose actual like journey we follow. She and Tree get into it because she's filming a lot and he doesn't want her to do that. He takes away her phone and she calls the cops and like alleges assault. In the mix, she tells them that the group has cult energy. But then Tree, like when he's being interviewed about this, he's like in kind of whispered tones, I don't know if I should talk about this on camera, but we're literally creating, he says, a show about a bunch of anarchists trying to create a new world. I don't think someone's just going to let that slide. Yeah. And then he's like, so I don't know if it's you guys and you're going to do this or if it's her or what. But so I just thought that those moments were really interesting to pay attention to.
The idea that like the system is against what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. So and that seems to really drive, and that's where like drives Tree in a lot of ways, and also why he's like terrified of the word cult at one point, because it's like, if you call us a cult, like we know what happens to cults. Like we've seen Jonestown, we've seen Heaven's Gate, we've seen Waco, like, and so there's this. I think he says at one point, like, stuff like that will get somebody killed, right? And so there's this paranoia about being a cult, but then he kind of flips that language around on people at various moments,
right?
But yeah, the relationship with the producers and film crew is really interesting because they don't. There's a weird awareness of the crew that that you don't see in a sense of it being produced. And then but the problem with that is it then raises a lot of questions throughout once you make it clear that this is like Tree says, we're making the show about this thing. Well, then I'm like, all right, well, why did Nariah come back? Did a producer call her and was like, hey, we want you to come back at the end, right? Sure. Like so many of the things that happen, it's like, okay, how produced is this now? Which is like, to me, just as an audience member, I don't mind that, but I don't want it. I want to have to be figuring it out. Like, I find it kind of like not respecting the audience. Like, don't give away the joke. Like, I know that you're a magician. Okay, but if you're like, this is where I keep the rabbit, I'm like, no, I don't want to know that's where the rabbit is.
This is interesting because I thought that heavily produced. Thus, I mean, I think that's why there was the conversation of like, is it cult? Is this culty? Is it like was a thing that kept coming up? Like, I don't know that it would have been so overt or direct. except that there were people always asking that interview question. But I thought that we talked about a little bit with The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, how kind of stilted and forced some of those interactions were because it was so heavily produced. But you liked that one.
Yes.
Is it because you felt like the wives were savvier users of media and thus had like a different, like why did that one work for you and this one doesn't?
I think it's that early on, you're right. Like episode 1, we talked about, especially like the scene with the dad. But by episode 4, 5, 6, they're better. The segments are better produced.
Sure.
And so you're not seeing the sort of frame of production. Like obviously when they go to some paint thing, like the production set that up, but it doesn't have the fingerprints on it the way that it did in here, where it's like because of the way it's shot and because of the way they're doing, like because the tree's looking at the camera, like you're a camera crew, like get out of here, blah, blah, blah. Like you would never air that. You would never air someone telling the camera, get out of here. You would never air someone telling the camera, like you would never air a producer saying, this is what you signed up for.
Right.
Because that immediately villainizes the production team.
That makes sense to me. I think that it just goes to show perhaps though, like how much more versed you are in this form than I am in the kind of like reality universe, because for me, I kept getting frustrated with Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I was really interested in the relationships that were built and maintained or thrown into some kind of flux among the women. I was really annoyed when the stuff that they did was like introduced as, here's a thing to do. It's like, no, this is not a thing to do. This is a thing you were told to do.
Yeah.
And that was like brought to you by the people who are making this show, which is, how it works, I'm sure. Yeah. But I guess I kind of liked we know that this is what's happening. So it's like using, I always encourage my students to, or at least I'm not bothered when they do. I don't know if it's active encouragement, but like use first person in your research papers. It's chill because there's always a author behind a claim. There's always a subject position that is going to influence the kinds of claims and arguments that you're making. Always 100% of the time. So the author is dead, but also long live the author. Like it's own that and just like be upfront about it. And so I kind of, the one thing that I did find, I found the whole thing a little bit voyeuristic and weird, but I was like, all right, cool. But if this is going to be like that sort of dynamic, then at least you've got the people in this group being like, I don't know. I mean, it would be cool if you did not film this council meeting that we're about to have because we want to have an authentic conversation. Patrick asks it in a really genuine way, I think. But then the cameras record anyway. And so I do think that, I guess, sort of like, I think that the gender dynamics are really interesting. Yeah. I do not think that the sexual voyeurism is interesting. I think that the phenomenon of watching and being watched that is so present in the series is really interesting. But then the actual like ways that comes into play is kind of a drag.
So I think the moments where in these shows there's a constant I don't know. I don't know everyone who watches these shows, but I think that for a lot of people in the audience, there's this constant like, what is authentic, what is not, right? And a lot of time, most often when production shows the magic hand of production shows up, it can make everything feel less authentic. There are moments where production can show itself, like they did this in the last 2 seasons of The Bachelor and Bachelorette have done this, where there would be moments where like they'll show the Bachelor like muffing a line that they clearly gave him to say. And so you're like, oh, like there are lines that, and like,
Right.
but that is a way that says like, no, we're not insulting your intelligence. We know you know that this part, we told him to say that.
Yeah.
But that then signals that all this other stuff that happens, that's really real. Right. And so there's a way that like revealing production can make it feel more real, more authentic for the audience. But it can also, if it's not done the right way, where it says like, this is, yes, nod, nod, wink, wink, this is produced, but that's real. It can just make, if it's not done well, it can throw all of it into question as to what's real. And like that, I think, and maybe I've been sort of like poisoned by some of the TikTok videos from the cast members that I've watched after the show was produced, where they were like, this was so, we were so poorly edited, blah, blah, blah. But like, I do think that like, the stuff you're talking about to me makes it felt too heavy-handed in a way that like,
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I don't know.
So the people who did you find on TikTok?
Julia and Tree are on TikTok. And
so
YouTube.
They did not like the way that this played out.
No, there's some stuff from like right after it came out where like it's very funny if you go through like Tree's TikTok. It's like this new show coming out in October, and then like you fast forward to like the end of the year, and it's like, or Julia the same way, and then it's like, oh, that show. I was on this show, and it totally didn't tell the real story, and blah blah blah.
I mean, it is kind of interesting to watch from episode 1 to episode 6. There is it's very implicit. It's not something that they actually talk about, but there is this interesting arc of like the energy that you get from, especially Tree, I think. But he's so like excited to show you the place, and he's got things to say, and he has like stuff to tell you about intentional community, and Julia's telling you about her rooster noodle stew, and then toward the end, like they seem right. What we receive is because it's not as varnished and produced in that way. They're tired of people being there, and you see Tree telling the camera crew to back off, and that they've like messed it all up.
Yeah, and you don't. And I guess my thing is like, you don't have to air that. Like they didn't have to include that,
right?
Those are editing decisions. They didn't have to, they didn't even have to include the editor saying, the producer saying, you know what you signed up for. And so to me, like, that would be the question I'd have if I was like talking to the, producers, like, walk me through the thinking of the last 2 episodes, because I don't know. We talk like the ending, it just kind of fizzles, and it's just like, I don't know.
I couldn't tell if they were done because they had to be, because like maybe they were kicked out of the community too. I don't know. If they had to do the 10-day thing, like you said, the trial period, maybe they were also like voted out. Or if they were trying to set up space for future storytelling, because they show us Julia and Tree kind of starting to be at odds with Patrick. Yeah. And so now Tree and Julia are talking about maybe starting their own commune.
Yeah.
We see Tyler, who says one of his last sentences is, you can't be a good man unless you're willing to be a violent man, or something like that. Like it was really intense. And he's, naked in the stream fishing, like with a stick. And
dude was naked a lot.
Again, I bet he was clothed a lot too. But what we see is always like the blurred out bums, because it's like, this is more interesting than the, like, I don't know, or sensationalist. But like, I just, anyway, so Tyler is in a space where he wants to start taking over with his wife, Heather. He even calls himself like a dictator at one point, and she's like, ooh, that's a strong language. And he's like, I'm chill with that. And so we have these like little splinters of where the plot could go, but it's not clear. Like, whether
there was no like
why or where or why.
There was I needed one of those like, where are they now after, like, like at the end of a Great British Bake Off where they're like, they're all traveling around Britain together, visiting each other. Like I needed that, like after filming,
right?
Patrick is living in this cabin in Nashville by himself.
Yeah, you did want to know where are they now? Yeah.
Tyler's, been arrested for a bar fight or I don't know, whatever.
What else did you? Those are my things. What were the things that stuck out to you?
So, like, whether it's a commune or a cult, I think to me, there was just like a giant hole in the garden community, like, because like, can you have a community, much less a cult, without a shared ideology and shared practices? Because like the only thing they have no, like, what is supposed to hold this whole thing together when you have like, and like you talked about the like Naraya and Oak Tyler, like this conversation coming from like very different sort of theological places on one level, like, but like there's no charismatic leader to hold it together. There's the only kind of ritual that they show that they kind of ongoingly do is the councils. There's like no shared ideology other than like you have people there who are preppers, you have people there who are like radical ecologists, you have people there who are like, and so if you were like, what does it mean to be a part of this group? There's not a single easy answer. And so it's like, there's no there.
This is part of why I don't love the category or the term, because of course its meaning is always going to depend on the criteria that is placed on it. And the set of criteria is always going to depend on who's describing it. And yeah,
but any social group, whether you want to call it a cult or not, like if there's not a thing, like I don't see any of the things that one would expect to hold a community together,
right,
like happening in any kind of shared identity way, right?
Totally. And I guess the thing is too, and this is why I think you do find the term at least that it has some kind of utility for you in a way that I'm kind of like, I don't know. But because there are all sorts of groups who do have those criteria, who do meet those criteria, that then we don't use the term for.
Right.
And so,
yeah, but they're actually a community and hold together, right? Like in some ways, the Sexy Party and the Fear Tower, I think, were really good ideas because at least they were some sort of shared ritual practice. Like if they had said, like, we're gonna have sexy parties every 2 weeks, or we're gonna do this, Fear Tower thing every month. Like there would have been, maybe
the Fear Tower. Like very quickly for those who have not seen it, the Fear Tower was like they built like the letters FEAR out of wood and then put it at the top of a big tower and then burnt it down.
Yeah. So that to me, I think a lot of the stuff you brought up was sort of my other big ideas. But for me, it's like I don't see a thing. I don't see a there to like hold the group together, which is probably why it sort of peters out at the end.
Well, I guess that the thing that they would point to, or why they've existed for as long as they have, is like their consensus that society is a non-starter, that society is bankrupt, that society is something that you need to extricate yourself from.
Yeah.
But of course there are, like you said, so many different kinds of people who believe that. And so I thought it was also a very careful, or at least calculated choice to make sure that the people that we saw coming to the group to try it out were so caricaturedly, if I can make that an adverb, different. Yeah. Like so from different parts of the nation, like very different ideological frameworks guiding them, very different motivations.
Whoever discovered like we can have one Tyler who's tall and blonde and fit and wants to do all the work, and another Tyler who's shorter and dark haired and bigger and can't really work.
I did not like the way they characterized him at all.
It was like
I thought
clearly,
it was so exploitative.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, like this sort
and
of.
then those two are the ones like they kind of describe him as a Viking. Like the prepper Tyler is the one who then says to the other Tyler, you can't pull your weight. And so because you can't help, you need to get out.
Yeah. And I mean, and literally the episode's called A Tale of Two Tylers is the episode title for that one.
That's right.
So, I mean, this sort of gets to my takeaway, which is like the real cult is society. Tree was right all along. But like building a community is really hard. Like they talk about the Rainbow Family, and I went down a brief Rainbow Family rabbit hole today.
Because Patrick grew up in that.
Yeah, the Rainbow Family, which started in the 70s. A lot of Vietnam War protesters.
I think they still meet every year, don't they?
They do. But the thing about Rainbow Family, like, so they I was looking at a bunch of FBI documents about them that basically was like accusing them of drug trafficking because of all the drugs they brought to their, like marijuana and mushrooms. But the thing about it's a gathering every year, and it's a series of gatherings, and there's regional ones, but it's not a sustained living together community. So it's like if you're making decisions about having one big event, it's much easier to do that with this sort of consensus thing, as opposed to like the ongoing, like what is the nature of this place we're living every day is going to be.
Right.
Gets like much trickier, and the idea that like the word, like anytime anyone had any claim to authority or attempt to sort of devise some structure of authority, that was when the word cult immediately got applied. So it's like all these people for whom like, and so it there's something in the show about the limits of like, of an ethos that's like the only thing that held these people together was like they did not want to answer to anyone at any point, which makes it ungovernable at a certain level. Whereas like I think which is not kind of what Rainbow Family was trying to do. And also it's funny for all the paranoia that Tree has, how much, if you compare them to other commune projects we've seen like Rajneesh or even Jonestown, like there was very little government interference. Like I don't, this does not seem like something that, maybe I'm wrong, but like the FBI was super worried about.
Well, I mean, even when Naraya calls the cops on Tree, and she says he assaulted me because he took my phone, and I was really scared, and they they ask some questions around whatever, and then they're like, so we don't really see an assault here. So like even when they're called in, they're like,
when she comes back, she talks about people she's like, I believe they're putting stuff in the food physically or energetically.
Yeah.
And I was like,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really hard to keep track of that.
But then that's when, so she has like a secret meeting with Jessica and Ricky and Tashila. Those are all prospective members who come. And she tells them that. And that's when Tashila is like, oh, I don't know about this, because she's really concerned with safety. And so she just takes off, and it's, I don't know. She was one of my favorite characters, actually.
I don't know if they're putting something in the food or if I'm getting used to eating out of the dumpster. I'm like, it's probably the dumpster.
Maybe both. I don't know. Could be both. Give me two things.
What was your takeaway?
Well, speaking of it can be two things. I find, as I have been saying, I just find yes/no questions about groups of people exhausting and uninteresting and kind of unhelpful, because they ensure that it shows like a range of humans in that group of prospective members, and each brings something really different to the table, but then it still, despite that, insists on asking that question of are they or aren't they? And both, neither, something else entirely. Also, not unlike wondering about how cell phones work in a sustainable community, I also wondered about the role of introverts in commune living, because as someone who does not like logistics but also is highly introverted, I struggle at I get like so many things about like society is a drag, growing stuff in the earth is cool, not wasting, that's great, but a group though, So I just wonder. I would struggle with the group,
similarly,
and maybe those are the those are
part where Jessica's like, I feel like I've just been outside forever. I've been outside I'm just always outside.
And maybe introverts just kind of like they just do their own thing, and so then they have their own like I don't know. But
yeah,
I just wonder if there are any introverts in a community.
That's what homesteading is, though. Introverts homestead. They don't go to a commune. They go get their own land and they do the homesteading thing.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what you do. Like, because like I don't want to be around people. I'll do my own thing.
But yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I thought that like your point though about the kind of vacuum of authority, I think was especially interesting because you're right. And it's especially interesting to me in a group of extroverts. A group of extroverts who don't want to lead.
Yeah.
Except for Tyler, who
no
comes
one should be in
and,
charge except maybe me.
Right.
Under the right circumstances, it could be me.
Right.
But definitely no one else. And then, I mean, I will say though, like, there have been moments in my life, usually like in the summer, where I'm like, if my job was just like staying alive, that might actually be fine.
Really?
Like if I was just in charge, like if it was just like gardening and farm and like if I was just like,
I would last for 25 seconds. I feel like in the zombie apocalypse or whatever, those like shows, they don't make any sense to me. I mean, I like a horror genre and I like a zombie.
I mean, I'm going to need YouTube during the zombie apocalypse so I can learn how to do stuff.
This is the thing. I would look for the first. I don't know.
But there's something about like waking up and like you have no to-do list, right? You have no exterior to-do list.
I took it to a dark place.
No, it's like you wake up and it's like, what am I going to do
You're
today?
Trying to be hopeful.
I got to do these things. I got to fix that thing. I got to build this thing. But I don't have any email or anyone being like, hey, when are you going to, this is due, or hey, you need to do this for me, or here's this paperwork. Like that is very... that sounds like it'd be very meaningful and okay.
I bet it would for 10 days. And then you'd be like, oh my God.
And then we can
send me an
after
email.
10 days, they
That's
can
my hunch.
count down to see.
Yeah.
I'm doing the countdown on my hands, but it's a podcast.
Well, I think it's always like, it's one of those grass is greener things. Like it seems useful because our context is so extraordinarily different from that.
Yeah.
And then
this is the dark side of like you get tenure, you get at the top of the mountain and you're like, you know what I'd rather do? Not this.
I really liked Heather, who said, this was Tyler's wife, the PI, and she says at the beginning, because he's going for it and he wants to take her with him, and she's like, and then she shows up later and that's a whole thing. But the reason that she says, she's like, yeah, society is coming to an end. And so I am going to enjoy the hell out of some electricity and hot water while I can. I'm like, girl.
That's a good attitude. What?
That resonated for me.
Yeah. What's your cult favorite?
So the thing that bothered me, obviously, as I was watching this documentary series is just the failure of a group of showmakers who I'm sure are very smart and savvy and creative to ask more interesting questions. And so you gave a shout out to our MA program last week, but that's my cult favorite, man, because our religion and culture MA program, I think it teaches people to ask more interesting questions than yes, no about groups of human beings. And
that's the religion and culture program at the University of Alabama.
Yes,
in the Department of Religious Studies.
Yes, it is. And it's like, here's social theory, but also here are useful like tools digitally that you can use in a host of different places. Anyway, yeah, so that's my cult favorite. I am proud of the work that we are doing in this department to help people ask more interesting questions than yes, no about groups of human beings.
Yes, I agree. Even if it makes me have to answer emails. I can't just go.
You get to answer emails.
I get to.
You get, yes, like legit though.
I get to answer emails.
It is a honor and a privilege.
My cult favorite is the For Everyone Collective. You can find them foreveryone.collective.com. They make the most amazing prison abolitionist themed clothing and stickers and all sorts of stuff. I have some of their stickers, some of their clothing. They also do like reclaimed clothes that they do. And what I love about them is they employ people who are either formerly incarcerated people who are returning, or people who have family members or have been some way impacted by incarceration. And I thought of them because of kind of the language of like consensus and everything that was so much in the documentary, because they hold regular circles to maintain peace and address conflict as it comes up. They pay a living wage and share their profits across their employees. They provide health care and so they're like doing it all really well. They have this whole stuff on sustainability. You should check them. Everyone should check them out. But go to For Everyone Collective, buy All My Homies Hate Prisons t-shirt, and buy a lot of stuff from them. They also do custom screen printing. So if you want someone to do screen printing and not some cheap, a lame way, reach out to them too.
Was it created by incarcerated people? Or is it by like activists who are doing the work?
It is worker owned and collectively operated by formerly incarcerated people. So yeah,
cool.
Yeah,
okay.
Comes out of that. It's very cool stuff. Very, very cool.
So next week we're going to talk about the documentary Going Clear, Scientology, and the Prison of Belief.
Yeah, the Prison of Belief.
It's on both Netflix and Max. You said, right?
Yeah, it is. It appears to be. Yeah. So we'll. It's a 2-hour documentary, so we'll get ready for that. And a step away from the more reality TV-ish stuff, I think will be good. So
will be for me. Back to a 2-hour documentary. Yes.
Yeah.
Now I'm in my media wheelhouse.
Yeah. So thanks for listening to Cult Favorite. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and when you subscribe, be sure to leave a rating and a review. Follow us on all the socials at Cult Favorite Pod. We'd love to hear your feedback. DM us, leave us a comment. Special thanks to the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Alabama for production assistance and a really great MA program. Thank you, Merinda.
Thank you, Mike. I can't wait to talk to you again next week.
We'll see y'all next week.